Welcome to Web3 Watchdogs, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of Web3 security, compliance, and risk. Join Michael Pearl as he interviews executives from across the Web3 industry to uncover the challenges and opportunities of this rapidly evolving space. Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by Cyvers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. Cyvers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Web3 Watchdogs, the podcast that focuses on everything security, compliance, fraud, risk, and basically everything that has to do with safety and security in the Web3 space. And today we have a very interesting guest, Anya Szpak. Anya is the Chief Legal Officer at Nexus Mutual. Anya, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Michael, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I have been actually following some of the episodes, and so you're doing an absolutely marvelous job, just shedding a little bit more light on all of the security, etc. issues.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Anya. And perhaps you can give us more details about your background and how did you come to work at Nexus Mutual and what did you do beforehand?
Yeah, absolutely. So my legal journey began in the world of insurance. So I trained and I started practicing as a lawyer in some of the top tier law firms dealing with insurance globally. I did some qualification at the Lloyd's of London, so, very traditional insurance background. But it wasn't until I moved to the tech world, the Accenture, Bally's. Before Nexus Mutual, I worked for Fireblocks. That's where things really shifted for me. I kind of very quickly realized just how much I love the complexity, the pace at which the legal world changes, the innovation, the fact that legal issues are constantly evolving. When you practice in insurance, in litigation, because I started in insurance and litigation, things are already settled. There are precedents, there are rules in place. So there is very little scope for innovation. But when it comes to things like data protection, privacy, crypto, more recently AI, the legal landscape is changing so dramatically, and especially the past 5 to 10 years. So I've always been someone who likes to be challenged, to keep learning and growing. Like, fun fact, I've just embarked on doing another master's in legal technology. So I will be focusing, or I am already focusing, on AI and blockchain. And it is because I want to be involved in all of those changes. So when Hugh and Nexus Mutual approached me, I felt like it was a perfect opportunity. It was a brand new role. I would be the first in-house legal counsel for the company. And it was basically, for me, it was the opportunity to not only help to shape the company, but the entirely, new legal and financial ecosystem in a way. I felt a little bit similar in Fireblocks, but definitely not to the same degree. And I would say, I had no idea when I joined Nexus Mutual just how little I knew about DAOs, about DeFi, which is not helped by the fact that the laws that are governing those areas are still being built in real time. And I think this is what is so exciting, that we are involved in something that is being built in front of our eyes, and we have the opportunity, or I have the opportunity, to be part of that process. And that is something that really a very few lawyers can say, that they're working in a space where the rule book is still being written. Of course, not without challenges. There are moments of uncertainties. There are a lot of gray areas because there are there are no rules for some of the things that we do, and some things are still undefined. But it is part of the fun, if you can say that, as a lawyer. So I definitely never dread Mondays. I'm very excited for every day. And just being a lawyer, as you are yourself, I just feel like I have to say that nothing that I will say during the podcast constitutes a legal advice. They mostly my opinions, but hopefully they'll be helpful to some people that are in a similar position that I am as a lawyer.
So disclaimer made. So you've done your legal job.
Yeah.
And I have to say kudos to you for doing the master's. But I think that any person that spent more than 2 years in the crypto space already probably has a PhD in legal, innovation, finance, and so on. The
100.
things that you learn by on-the-job training is priceless. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit about Nexus Mutual. And I know that probably some of our listeners and viewers heard about Nexus Mutual and know about your insurance products. But still, I kind of feel that insurance in the Web3 space, it's something that is not really talked about thoroughly. And that's something that still requires explaining on how do you do insurance, which assets do you insure, how do you do the underwriting, how do you do the claims. It's something that is really hard to grasp how it works in the Web3 space. So perhaps you can give us the 101.
Absolutely. So first of all, I think Nexus Mutual is probably the most passionate and mission-driven place that I've ever worked for. It was founded by Hugh, and just for your listeners, because I think it's very helpful to understand Hugh's background, he is an actuary by profession. So again, another person with the background in traditional finance, in traditional insurance. He was a CFO, so Chief Financial Officer for Munich Re, which is probably one of the biggest reinsurers globally. But what was very unique about Hugh is that he was one of those people that was interested in Bitcoin, in blockchain, in crypto very early on, like as early as 2013, 2014, which is quite unusual for someone with, that traditional background, I would say. Sadly, he was a victim of a massive hack, and he lost an awful lot of Bitcoin to one of those biggest hacking players, without naming anyone specifically. But I think probably it was at that stage when he realized just how little protection there exists in this space. So he founded Nexus Mutual in, I believe it was 2018, 2019. So we're now in a very kind of mature startup stage. But the insurance model that he's built is tailored specifically for the risks in the crypto ecosystem. And that's what makes it so special. And I think it's very important to separate, because there is the platform, which is built on the blockchain, and then there is product. Next is the real innovation, is the platform, is the idea that there is a decentralized global mechanism for coordinating capital, connecting it to risk in a most efficient possible way. And that is where the things get really interesting. The ability to pull capital from anywhere in the world, deploy it transparently, have the community decide what risks are worth considering. That is something that traditional insurance simply can't do. And then there is the product side, and in many ways that is still rooted in the traditional structure. You still have, we don't call it a policy, but we call it a cover. And you have the terms, you have exclusions, etc., etc. But it is created, and that's what differentiated from the traditional insurance. It is created by the community, for the community, or these specifically for the needs of the blockchain world, of the crypto world, if you want to be very specific. And the protection can be against smart contract failures, validator slashing, depeg events, etc., etc. So the platform evolved to meet those needs, which is exactly what this space needs. I'm pretty sure that Hugh has mentioned that to me at some point. That was before my time at Nexus. But when Nexus started, one of the ideas of policies was to do like an earthquake policy, 0 interest. Because why would anyone go, 3-4 years ago to blockchain to seek those? That sort of policy. And I think at that stage also it just hit that what the community or what the team really has to concentrate on is what is needed, what's needed for the people who are involved in crypto community, those everyday things like the FTX blow up, etc., etc. So hopefully that gives you some background about Nexus.
Sure thing. And does the coverage that you offer, is it aimed primarily for companies or for retail or for both? So let's say if I'm a crypto holder with a significant amount of Bitcoins and Ethereum, can you cover my wallet, or can you cover an entire company? Do you cover smart contracts? Basically, who are your clients and what's your main target audience?
So we have, I think now in excess of 10,000 members, and those are our clients. And, just to be very clear about how it works, the clients are the community, the members. So each member insures, basically everyone insures one another, like what they used to do back, hundreds of years ago. And what we are open, and I think this is beautiful about Nexus Mutual, is that we will tailor the product to individual customers. So whether you are an individual or whether you are an investment portfolio, investment fund, basically we are open to work with or to protect anyone. And obviously there are certain, and again, probably Hugh would be better placed to say what risks we are unwilling or unprepared to cover, but we are always open to have a conversation with, whoever the client might be. Is really as simple as reaching out, telling us, this is what I want to do, this is my portfolio, this is what I am prepared to pay as well, because we work very closely with people on, what are you actually prepared to pay? And then we're seeing whether we could offer something for that.
Yeah, and to be honest, like thinking about Hugh as a victim of a hack, you would think that going into this world of protecting assets after you've been hacked yourself, and the repercussions of such an unfortunate occurrence. First of all, it probably gives them a lot of expertise to do
Yes.
that and a very deep knowledge of the risks that are out there. But what I'm curious about is, how do you assess those risks? So for instance, if you're going to cover a specific DeFi protocol, how do you assess the risk of hacks? I'm not even talking about, the market risks and the token that is involved and so on, which is a separate discussion. But the mere, possibility of the DeFi protocol being hacked. A couple of days ago, we uncovered a $70 million hack. And, unfortunately, this quarter started really bad with, Bybit,
Yes.
which is obviously a centralized entity, and then quite a few decentralized entities as well. So just to summarize, how do you calculate the risk from hacks, and how do you address it while you're setting up the coverage?
I feel awful because I'm not really able to answer this question, as Hugh works on that normally with the product team. What I can say, from what I've overheard during those discussions in the past, a lot of that comes down to gut feeling, believe it or not. It's not Nexus Mutual, and I'm sure we'll come to that during the conversation. But any insurance, discretionary insurance, as we are provider, cannot rely in this space on actuarial data. There is no historical data. So it's very difficult to assess. So I think in the past, and I think this probably still the case, very often it is a matter of what does your gut feeling tell you? Like, doing the, again, I'm not quite sure what the research is, because being the lawyer, I'm not as involved in, the product and risk. But I'm pretty sure that Hugh would say that he probably has his stuff that he does, and then a lot of that is gut feeling. The understanding of the market is exactly what you've said, is the understanding of the market, is the fact that Hugh and the team, they have been involved in DeFi, in crypto, in blockchain in one way or another for the past at least a decade. So he would have seen everything. It's like, I came to this space 4 years ago. So I'm learning what's happened over the past 4 years. I'm comfortable with that. But whatever happened before that, I have to read up about it. I haven't lived through it. I lived through FTX, I lived through Bybit, etc., etc. And I think when you have this wealth of experience on top of the traditional background as well, it's probably easier to assess what you are prepared to cover and underwrite.
Definitely. But to be honest, you don't have to feel bad for 4 years or 2 years, because in this industry, I've been in this industry for about 12 years, and you keep learning all the time. And even some of the things that you live through, you keep understanding them. Take FTX, for instance. Some things are still surfacing on the news that, haven't been uncovered yet. So, everyone has something to learn in this industry.
100%.
But just to refer to that, to the coverage and the actuary policies, I think that one of the most interesting things that I see right now, and I would love to hear your take on that, is just like in the traditional insurance, when let's say you want to insure your house, you will be required to apply different security and safety measures to reduce the risk of your house being burglared or set on fire and so on. So you can set fire alarms or create a better lock for your door and so on. So the equivalent of that in our space is basically putting up safeguards with respect to hacks and scams and fraud and so on. So is it something that you as a company are dealing with, working with security companies or requiring from your clients to apply different security measures and so on?
No, not really. We don't have strict requirements like that. We have exclusions. I can't think of anything that would be relevant, as an example to this. Obviously, I think it helps the space and the crypto environment in general to have whitelisting, have those things that do make the ecosystem in general more secure. But no, we haven't got like a list of rigid, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to have in place to be able to be covered. And again, it comes down to that flexibility, of not being a traditional insurer, so not being driven by the regulatory requirements, by slow pace of changes, by the bureaucratic requirements. We have this ability to tailor. We have the ability to tailor the cover, to tailor what we provide to the requirements of people that reach out to us for that. And we're able to have this conversation. So, it's not like, oh yes, you have to tick A, B, C, and D to do something. Like, just reach out, let's see what you're seeking, and we can tell you what we can offer, and we can see if there is a way of meeting somewhere in the middle.
Interesting. And I'm curious, the process of basically the claims, right? The insurance claims. How do you go about it? Because again, we can imagine how it works in the traditional, insurance world. But how does it work with decentralized entities that are holding different assets? Some are in wallets, some are in smart contracts. What do they have to do to prove their claims? What's the process? It's really interesting to understand.
So, first of all, to buy a cover, you receive an NFT. So basically your policy, we don't call it a policy, we call it a cover. Your cover is in your NFT. So if you have a claim, probably the easiest example that I can think of on like FTX, for instance, it was providing whether it's your wallet address or the screenshots. This is probably more of the unusual hybrid of claims because obviously FTX was a portal, so there was an ability to send a screenshot of the portal account, etc. Normally it would be just your wallet address and any supporting information that you might have. And this is submitted via channel to Nexus Mutual. All of the members have the ability to read through that. All of the members have the ability to basically make their own assessment. If you want to vote, because just to give you a little bit of an overview, maybe I should have mentioned that earlier, but Nexus Mutual is based on a voting system. So, it's not like in the traditional world where you buy a policy and if A happens, then, you get a payout. In order to get a payout, there has to be a voting by the members. And normally it is a very simple process because everything is on chain, or most of the things are on chain. So it is very transparent. The members can do their own investigation if needs be. But then we have certain amount of members that want to vote, and they stake their NXM, which is our internal utility token, and they vote whether to accept or reject this claim. If the claim is accepted, then I believe there is like a 24-hour period just to make sure that there was no foul play, no fraud. And then if the claim is accepted after 24 hours, you can just redeem your claim. It's as simple as that. It's not a drawn process of paperwork, trying to see what the exclusions are. If you look at our cover, and again, everyone can have a look at the covers that we provide because they are on chain, they're like fully transparent. We basically provide very limited wording. We don't want to be bureaucratic. We don't want to, ambush people with like a 50-page policy, because this is what is reserved for traditional insurance, or at least that's how it feels. Our covers are very simple in a way that those are normally between 4 and 6 pages document, and they have very clear, like, this is what's covered, this is what is excluded, this is the process. You have to wait, like there is a grace period sometimes, like let's say the FTX example. If the accounts are frozen, then let's say you have to wait for 100 days to make sure that nothing, gets put back in the meantime. And then you can make this claim. Like FTX is probably, or like any kind of custodians like that, is quite a drastic example, because normally that grace period is between like 10 and 14 days. But yeah, it's really is as simple as you make the claim, and then normally within a few days, you can already redeem your claim if obviously it has been accepted.
Very interesting. So essentially, it's kind of like a DAO ecosystem that, your clients are also the insurers, and they are reviewing the claims. So basically, one day you can be, the claimant, and next day you can be the member that is going to be reviewing another member's claim.
Yeah, 100%. Like, at Nexus, we've built a very clear and structured claim process that is governed by the code and the community. So, it's not like opaque institution. There is no black box. You can see everything that is happening because claims are submitted on chain. And you basically can see the voting. You can see who voted, how it was voted. Nothing is hidden behind closed doors. Everything is visible, making the process very transparent and very accountable. So yeah, I think this is probably the trustless side, right? Because you don't have to trust anyone. That's the process, and that's the fundamental shift from the traditional insurance. No middlemen, no paperwork, no drawn out appeal process. You just have to trust the code, trust the governance process, or you just know that it's there and it's reliable.
Very interesting. And you've mentioned regulation earlier. So obviously in the traditional, insurance world, everything is heavily regulated, and everything starting from, the policy and up to the claims and so on is regulated. How does it work with Nexus? Is it something that, let's say, jurisdiction dependent? Do you have any regulatory requirements, any licenses that you need to obtain? Or is it, fully decentralized, fully trustless, and, you're not required to do anything?
That's an absolutely fantastic question, because we're very privileged in the UK to have this concept of discretionary insurance. So traditional insurance, as we've already mentioned, is very regulated in the UK, whether it's like FCA, other institutions. And the difference between the traditional...
Yeah, perhaps it's a good time to say that the UK and London and, Canary Wharf and the city in specific are, basically the insurance hubs of the world, right? The insurers and the reinsurers are there, Lloyd's and so on.
100%.
So, no wonder that you are based there and building the decentralized side of insurance there.
Yeah, it's definitely the world hub of insurance. Like you mentioned, when you go to Lloyd's of London and that area, basically probably 9 out of 10 people are the brokers for one of the big insurers. But in terms of the regulatory and licensing aspect, in the UK, we have something that's called discretionary insurance. And basically that means that the traditional insurance, as I've already mentioned, if A happens, then there will be payout. In the discretionary insurance, the mutual, in this case, Nexus Mutual, has the discretion to approve or deny a claim. Hence, we've got the governance process, hence we've got the voting process. And this tiny little difference makes all the difference, because that means that the discretionary insurance does not have to be licensed. And this is not something that, we've made up for your listeners. If anyone is interested, there are big institutions like the Medical Defence Union, the MDU, the Medical and Dental Defence Union of Scotland is another one that are like Nexus Mutual, the discretionary insurances. so they don't have to be licensed. There is also a precedent in law. I'm pretty sure it's probably one of those two institutions that were involved in the litigation in the past, and it was decided that actually a discretionary insurance is legitimate. Obviously, there is a difference between what is insurance, and then we've got the NXM, our native utility token. So there are other regulation that we had to look at from like the MiCA perspective, etc. But because the way that Nexus operates and because the way that our token operates, it seems that we've actually immune from that aspect of things, because the token is a closed system token. So we're not traded on any of the exchanges. You can only buy or you can only get a token if you are a member, and you can only trade this token with another member within a mutual, not outside of that. So how Nexus Mutual has been set up, how everything's been done from the very beginning, seem to be very legally compliant, but without having to be overregulated.
Yeah, good for you for not going into the realms of security tokens, and then you would have the headache of dealing with the FCA, with securities law, and so on. 100%. So I totally understand why you wanted to keep the regulation to the minimum. Anya, before we wrap up, just a final question about Nexus Mutual itself. And you've mentioned Hugh's background with respect to the hack that he suffered from. How do you keep Nexus Mutual safe and secure? In a sense that nobody's going to steal your tokens, nobody's going to trick the voting process, nobody's going to drain some of your smart contracts, or a smart contract that holds the funds that basically the members have deposited in order to provide liquidity to the policy and so on.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? This is incredibly important question, isn't it? And especially like you've mentioned, the Bybit hack and the level of social engineering that goes into hacks these days is incredibly ruthless, I would say. I didn't think 5-10 years ago that we would see anything like what we're seeing right now. And at the end of the day, I don't think that any company is immune to that. And I will be very boring in saying, you basically have to have a lot of awareness, almost to a paranoia level. I feel like this is the only thing that keeps you protected. You can have the multi-sig that we have, you can have whatever security measures, which I'm sure the Bybit and other, hack sufferers had. But at the end of the day, if you do not have the awareness, and this is what we do, this is what we put a lot of pressure on, is the security awareness, is having this constant conversation. Internally, we do share a lot of tweets where people do share their experience. We do have a lot of those conversations. We do have a lot of training. So I don't think there is anything that I can say that, you or your listeners don't already know. But I think at the end of the day, it's basically, just being a little bit paranoid. Even when I liaised with you guys, when I got the links to the podcast, etc., I copied the addresses and sent it to one of my senior engineers within Nexus Mutual. And I was like, can you just tell me for certain, that this is not a trick, that this is not potentially something that will suddenly drain my wallet, or will be just quietly sitting somewhere at the back of my computer waiting for the perfect moment to drain my wallet. So yeah, I think that's probably the only thing you can do, because it just seems with the AI, etc. these days, it's almost mission impossible to get it 100% right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one of the ways of doing social engineering nowadays and infiltrating into protected computers and so on is by inviting someone to a podcast, or offering them, if you're a startup, then, all of a sudden a huge VC approaches you and finds interest in your next round. So that's definitely advisable. Awareness is important. But may I add that security tools are also important. Awareness alone is not sufficient, but it is obviously the first stepping stone towards a more secure future.
Yeah. No.
On that note, thank you so much. We've learned a lot. Web3 insurance, as I said in the beginning, is something that people are still kind of learning and are being exposed to. And it was really fascinating understanding how Nexus Mutual is offering its covers. I learned a new word today, and doing that through the community, with the community. So very interesting. Thank you so much. And we would love to hear about your progress in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for having me, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by Cyvers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. Cyvers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.